Welcome to episode 38 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast about people in Canadian theatre. On Stageworthy, I might talk one-on-one with an actor, director, playwright, or producer, or I might get a group of people together to talk about a specific aspect of theatre in Canada. If you'd like to be a guest on Stageworthy or just want to drop me a line, you can find Stageworthy on Facebook and Twitter at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. Carlyn Rhamey is a playwright and actor who just finished a 5 Fringe Festival tour with her solo play, SAOR Free. If you enjoy the podcast, I hope you'll subscribe on iTunes or Google Music or whatever podcast app you use and consider leaving a comment or rating. I would actually love to start with what was it that sort of drove you to create the show that you took on tour this summer?
Yeah. For like why I chose that one to tour?
Well, let's start with what drove you to write it.
Well, the show is about it's a storytelling show about how I went to how I went to Scotland and Ireland and traveled on my own for the first time. And if you've seen the show, there's a man involved in all of that, of course. So because it's storytelling and because it's true, it was really fresh. It all just happened right at the end of last year. So right before I went on this trip, I applied for the CAFF tour because I knew I needed something this year to artistically to kind of hold on to and put my energy into after I came back from this adventure. And then I found out I got it right before I left, so it was kind of okay, I'll go and I'll do this and I'll come back and then hopefully I'll have something to say and tell. And then it ended up being this whole story and me revealing a lot about my life in the last couple of years, not just the trip. So that's kind of where it all came from.
So you entered the lottery before you had a show? Before you even knew if you had a thing to write about?
Yeah.
Oh, that takes something.
Yeah, I think and most artists do, like we struggle with deadlines. Like I've seen you talk about that, Phil. Like it's really hard to finish something, and I have been trying to finish something for 3 years. I've been trying to write a one-woman show, and then finally I saw a few storytelling shows at the Fringe, and I was like, oh, they're just getting up there and they're just talking and they're just sharing their own experiences. I can do that. I can finish. So I set my deadline, and then that was that.
Was there something that you thought a one-woman show or a solo show had to be before you saw those?
I had never seen a storytelling show, so I'd seen some that were a little bit more theatrical. That mine kind of ended up being anyway, but I'd never seen someone just get up and tell a story. I didn't even know that kind of thing existed. So, yeah, I know, it's so crazy. It's such a huge part of theater and Fringe, and I hadn't really seen it. I mean, all theater is storytelling, but not someone just get up with a water bottle, just be themselves and just talk. And I loved it, and I was gripped on every single word. So I wanted to try just connecting with the audience, just being me on stage.
Do you remember what it was?
Yeah,
or who
it was
that you saw?
There was Sam Mullins, the Untitled Sam Mullins Project, I think it was called. That
Sam Mullins. Oh man, yeah.
And then that, and of course, I saw 2 shows by Jeff Laird, and his energy every year inspires me to want to get on stage and just explode. So those 2, I was like, wow, I want to blend that and create something.
So and this was really your first, not just your first one woman show, but like your first Fringe?
I did. I've done London Fringe twice. One of those was a show I co-created with 2 other people. So it was an ensemble show that we'd written it and put on. But this was my first go at on my own writing and creating.
And so you did, instead of like just going to one, you went whole hog and went into did full 5.
Yeah, I'm go all the way or nothing at all, I guess.
Well, I mean, that's very true. That's very true. It's also, I mean, you were very lucky because, I mean, the CAFF lottery is I mean, the competition's pretty heavy for that.
Sure. I don't think, I forget kind of who told me about it and or what my thought process was. I don't think I realized how big of a thing it was until I applied, and then they tell you pretty like a week later. It's very short, and then it kind of blew up, and I was like, what did I just do? But it was wonderful. It was a great experience. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, it's like the instant tour. Instead of having to go to individually to a bunch of fringe festivals, you're like, as soon as that happens, that you're doing the 5 cities that you want to do.
And I think I didn't realize that. I mean, the people I spoke to said that it takes, years and years and years to get in. So I really wasn't expecting to get in right off the way. I was like, I better start applying now, so in 10 years I'll finally get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I mean, just like trying to get into, say, the Toronto Fringe, for example, it can take years and years, but you never know because of that lottery nature. I mean, there are people who do apply for years and years, and there's people who apply the first year and they just get in.
And some people have got it like 3 or 4 times, which I didn't realize until I met them, and I was like, oh, okay, it does happen.
Yeah. It does. Now, you were saying that you'd created shows yourself. Have you always been somebody who writes your stories, or is that something new for you?
I do try and write what I know. So whether it's my experiences or experience of people closest to me, when I was trying to write a show over the past few years, it was always stories of friends or stories of me, but kind of underneath a character that I would create. So this was the first time of just really it's sharing my own stories while still being me on stage.
Did that
for sure. And I mean, this type of show, this was an experience that was extremely embarrassing. I mean, it's about a breakup and what I thought was going to happen, it didn't happen. I mean, the show's not about that, but it's a small part. And a lot of people didn't really realize that that's what happened. I kind of keeping that hidden. So I had a couple of moments where I would call my director and be like, I can't do this. I can't tell everyone what actually happened. This is too embarrassing. Like, I'm mortified. But then we'd have the conversation of, but that's good theater. I mean, that's what people want to see. That's truth, and that's what happened. So pushed me forward, luckily.
Yeah. I mean, there's that at Fringe for solo shows, there's kind of 2 kinds of shows that you can see, and that one is sort of fiction, and one is the very confessional style of storytelling, where the story comes from inside you, and quite honestly, in some cases, like there's something really terrifying about, I mean, as actors, we're often used to having, the character between us and the audience, and if you're just telling a story about you, there's nothing. Yeah. It's just you,
Yeah, it is. It is, and like an extra level of stakes that are just personal, because you're really opening yourself up and bearing it all. I kept feeling so close to everyone who'd seen the show because I just felt like they were my best friend. They knew everything that happened to me.
Well, you just told them like you're and a relatively recent embarrassing story.
I made it harder on myself too by making it something that I was literally still going through.
Well, there's a certain, I have to give you kudos for bravery on that, because, it took me 8 years to write my show, and it's, fictionalized. There's a lot of fiction in there, as well as some truth. But it took me a long time before I was ready to face what I'd written. So there's a lot of bravery in like going through a thing and then just a few months later, just getting up and telling people about it.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, when you apply for the CAFF, no show.
Well, you better be ready to do it. Yeah. Because you kind of have no choice. Talk about your deadline. Have you always been a performer?
Pretty much. Yes. I've always known that I wanted to be an actor. Storytelling's a new thing for me, but I've always loved theater since I was 12 or younger.
One thing that I just sort of noticed that you're it sounds like you're making a bit of a distinction between storytelling and acting.
I guess I shouldn't be. I just started going to Toronto to do some of their storytelling nights. So I guess that's kind of stuck in my head right now of like getting up with a mic and sharing a story and then writing a show and doing it. Yeah. But yeah, it really isn't. It really is so fluid in each other. There really isn't that much of a distinction.
No, because I was about to say, because what you were doing, I mean, there isn't. I wouldn't want to make that kind of distinction because you're on a stage doing a thing, and if you're doing it well, you're kind of not separating yourself from the emotion behind the story. So it is definitely still acting. How old were you when you knew that theater was something you wanted to do?
Well, if you look in like my grade 8 grad book, it says future profession, actor or special education teacher, and now I work with people with special needs, and I'm an actor, so pretty young. I'm one of those very, very lucky people that have always known what they wanted to do.
I think a lot of us who go into theater, I think I've only spoken to a couple of people who came to it very late in life.
Other, earlier, late.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember what it was that made you want to do that? Do theater?
I think. Well, I have ADHD, and one of the things that I loved was that rush that you get. That's kind of the first memory of it before, right before you get up in front of all those people, you just get this surge of adrenaline, and I'm being the kind of kid that I was. That was just the greatest feeling I'd ever felt. So I wanted to go after that.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what your first experience with that was? What show it was?
We had created masks out of some sort of hard paper mache material or something, and we did Snow White, and I was dopey. So I didn't even have any words, so I don't know why I was so hyped up about it. But
the first time that you get up in front of people, it doesn't really matter if you're speaking or not. It can still be a terrifying and exciting thing. When did you know that it was a thing that you could do, like, to make a living?
Well, in high school, I had known that there were theater programs. Sorry. So I had applied to a few, and I went to Fanshawe College for Theatre Arts. So I guess sometime throughout my high school years, I figured that people are doing it. And then it's only recently that I realized that this whole concept of independent theater, which is amazing theater of people creating their own work, is a thing. So I'm kind of going in that direction now, rather than auditioning for professional companies in Toronto.
What's kind of interesting is I had this realization last night. I was talking to somebody else, and I came to this realization that if I wasn't creating my own stuff, I would probably not be doing theater anymore.
Yeah, I think everyone has to, and that was a big thing that they told us in school too. Is you can't just survive off of other people. You need to make your own work.
That's kind of a recent thing, because when I was in theater school a long time ago, nobody talked about that. It was all, you'll go to the audition, you'll get the job, you'll audition for the next thing, you'll get that job, and so on and so on and so on. And that was all that they talked about. And we've had to learn since then about, making your own work and the importance of
For
it.
sure. And as much as even my program, told us we had to make our own work, we never learned how to, apply to Fringe or, find a dramaturge or any of that. So it's a lot of, you're done school, you're out and figure it out.
Well, there is a lot of that. Yeah, I was lucky because I went to George Brown Theatre School and we had a business of acting course, which was super rare. It was the only school at the time that I knew of that had like any course that talked about this is how the business of acting works. Now, am I correct that you've done some work with Victoria Urquhart? And
I did.
Spur
Yeah, they were my. One of their first shows, Shakespeare on a Subway in Toronto, was my first show out of school 7 years ago.
And I mean, I've talked to Victoria about this, but what was it like performing Shakespeare in front of people who, many of whom may just have wanted to get home?
It was a very interesting experience. I'm glad I did that. It was the first thing I did after school. It's kind of exhilarating and hard at the same time because some people are pleasantly surprised and some people are pulling the alarm on you. So it was a lot of fun. Luckily, you're with a group, not by yourself, so you're able to kind of laugh about it afterwards. But definitely something that I think was important that Tori created, because I mean, it's just things like Shakespeare, for example, it's just not accessible for some everyday people, whether it's too expensive or they just haven't had a good experience with it. So
yeah, I think that there's a lot of people who think they don't like Shakespeare because they only remember that they didn't like it in high school, and they carry that with them. And they haven't actually had the opportunity to see it live
and see it done with a little bit of comedy and a little bit of more relatability that I think people are really starting to do now with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's always. I mean, I think that when you do Shakespeare. And sometimes if you adhere a little too much to the idea of, we have to do it period, so we have to have these elaborate costumes and things like that, you're kind of putting a barrier between yourself and your audience, because it's hard to identify with somebody who's wearing a ruff and pumpkin pants and things like that.
especially for young people who are getting their first experience with it. For
absolutely. Sure. To go back to your Fringe tour, what was the learning curve like for you in terms of getting ready to do this?
Huge. Luckily, I had a friend who's in Republic, John Patterson, who I'd met in the London Fringe a few years ago. So after I got on the CAFF, I called him and we had monthly chats leading up to Fringe about all the things I would need to do, Facebook ads, contacting media, learning how to use Twitter, which is so helpful for Fringe. Just all those basic things, and then tons of different guerrilla theater tactics, and so learning all those producer sides of things while trying to write your show was absolutely insane to do all at once. Big learning curve for
sure. After talking with John and then starting your tour, were there things that worked better than others? Things that you sort of maybe went in starting to think that you would do, but it just wasn't working, so you had to stop doing them and rely on something else to get your word out?
There was, I mean, things as simple as, it's good to choose a certain show that might be a bit more similar to your show to flyer. There are certain shows where there's a big, an emotional impact at the end. For example, your show. So, I mean, exiting flyering that show, probably the best thing. And so you kind of learn just by trial and error. I mean, you might see a line and you're like, oh yeah, they're all leaving, I'll grab them. But I mean, sometimes it's better to leave it and get the next one.
Yeah, no, I often found when I was on tour that, I mean, I found it easier to flyer a line going in than
and
people
John always told
out.
me that.
But you know, some fringes there aren't lineups. Like I found in Montreal, the people don't line up; they just sort of roll up in time for the show.
And the tricky thing there too is, I kind of had to realize that I wasn't going to be a person that says a few things and gives a flyer and then walks away. I'm the type of person that kind of has to sit and talk with them for 5 minutes. So I'll get less people, but in the end, I think it's sometimes, I mean, if that's more your style, then you're more effective that way. So you kind of have to figure out what works for you in regards to that sort of thing.
So which fringes did you do?
London, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, and Hamilton. I stayed all close to home.
So you kind of went close to home, far. You sort of went, so London, and then all the way to Quebec, and then back, and then closer to home. Yeah,
kind of a big circle.
Yeah. What did you find? I mean, I know every fringe is different. What did you learn about the fringes that you
well,
went
a big
to?
thing was I had no idea. I thought there was kind of a standard for, all of them. But really, once they've got the name, they can kind of do what they want. And so all of them have completely different guidelines and rules and expectations. So that was definitely new, especially going from like London, which is probably quite typical. London and Hamilton are quite similar. And then going to Montreal, where they're like, so you're good with letting people in half an hour late? And I was like, okay, sure.
Yeah. I found that a huge surprise when I was in Montreal. Just the fact that they were like, yeah, we're wondering if we can let people in late. And I was thinking like, I don't know.
Yeah, it catches you off guard, especially when they've got those big signs. I mean, especially in places like Toronto, it's like, no latecomers, no this. These are the fringe rules, and then you go somewhere and it's fringe, but it's not actually the fringe rules. Yeah.
Well, the fringe rules are pretty. I mean, the actual fringe rules are pretty simple. They kind of have to give all the money back to the artist, and they have to select by a lottery, and everything else is subject to what they want to do, and I don't know, like that the latecomer thing. I guess it's okay if you're thinking about it, because even if they're late, you're still getting their full.
Depends on the show.
Their full $10. Yeah. It does depend on the show. With mine, I'd wonder if can I take the time to make fun of them if they come in late? I don't know. But it's like, how do you handle that? Because it's not like it's a quiet thing. People
not
coming
at all.
in late. Even when they're trying to be quiet, it's never a quiet
it's definitely
thing.
you definitely have to make that decision yourself and decide whether or not it'll disrupt the show or add to the show if you can kind of make a thing about it when they come or not.
Yeah. I don't know how I'd handle it yet. So that's one of those, I had people in Hamilton, I had people come in like late to my show, which shouldn't have happened, but there was a whole thing going on outside, and I decided to make fun of them.
That's good.
Because I think that's the only thing I could have done, but I don't know if I'd want to invite that
to happen to each time. Yeah.
Oh, I don't, because people will. If you're like, I think if people will come in late. If you make it available to them, they're going to come in late. So I don't know.
It's tricky, yeah. I mean, Montreal has the good thing where you can save 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 50 minutes, so that you can
yes, that's true.
kind of make it a little bit easier on yourself that way. But or you don't have to at all. So I mean, just having that more options in other cities, or other cities are more stricter. I mean, I had no idea that all the rules were different.
What did you decide to do in Montreal?
I think I did probably 10 minutes for latecomers, because I kind of do a 15-minute intro thing anyway before we actually fly to Ireland and Scotland and show. So that worked out for me, and I do have the ability to kind of make fun of them for being late as well. But I totally see where other shows where it wouldn't work at all. So
yeah, absolutely. Were there other things that surprised you about the differences between the festivals?
There were. I mean, Montreal had a whole, which London didn't have, and I'd only done London. They had a whole kind of community space that was their office.
That's new. When I was there, they didn't have that, and I wish they had, because I love that idea.
Outside of the park, just having like couches, people can come in and like take a nap or fix their flyers, and then they had like coffee and bagels. So, and every time you walked in, they were just so thrilled to see you, and they'd ask you about all your how your shows are doing, what are you seeing, and see shows with you. So the employees in Montreal were very much in the festival with you, which was really nice.
That's one of the things that I find that's unique about Montreal, is the fact that, like, I've been to a bunch of fringes, and with the exception of Hamilton, where I was able to meet all of the fringe staff and to converse with them. Montreal previous to that was really the only time I've really had interactions with fringe staff, and they were always delightful and always really amazing.
They really are. They want you to succeed, and they want to see as much as they can too. They love the festival.
Yeah, absolutely. Did going from Montreal to Ottawa, did you find a difference between those?
Yeah, because Montreal all kind of easygoing. Then going to, Ottawa's easygoing too. It's great, but still they're a little bit closer to London with a more typical way of doing things. So that it was kind of like, okay, get back into it. But I had a great time in Ottawa. That was one of my favorite festivals. Just so much fun. The artists and the people, like the community and the touring people, kind of mesh a lot better, probably the best than in any city I went to. So it's really great to kind of see that community all come together to support each other.
That's very cool. That's very interesting, because in a lot of places there is a bit. I find in Ontario mostly, there's a bit of a difference or a bit of a separation between the local and the touring.
In Toronto, especially.
Oh, well, the Toronto Fringe is very much a unique animal in that it's. I think that touring shows are at a detriment in Toronto, because Toronto tends to be so focused on itself. And everybody who doesn't live in Toronto right now is going, well, big surprise, Toronto's focused on itself. But as far as Fringe is concerned, Toronto is very interested in what's going to be the next Drowsy Chaperone or Kim's Convenience or The Kink in Her Hair, whereas a lot of other fringes are very interested in what's coming from other places.
Or interested in kind of inviting them into the city and joining their community. Yeah, so it was very different. Yeah, then again, going from Ottawa to Toronto, like, whoa, night and day.
So previously you'd only done the London Fringe, and so now you've done 5 fringes, all of which are pretty close in proximity to where you're from. Are there things that you learned from that about your show that you want to, I don't know, make changes to the show or work on something new for when you do it next?
For sure. Doing it that many times in so many different places with so many different groups of people and audiences, you by the end of it, you for sure know what's working and what doesn't work. It's hard right off the bat, I think, when you create something, you don't really want to let anything go. So, but after, you've been through a good long run, you can kind of see where you can use that blue pen and make some edits. For my show specifically, I met up with, someone who liked the show and had some ideas for it. So I have a dramaturge that's going to work with me on it for next year, which will be great.
Nice. How quickly after performing it a few times did you realize that there were things that maybe you might want to work on for the future, or that weren't quite what you wanted them to be? Probably
after. I knew that it's an on, like, this was my first attempt with it, and it still had a lot of work to do. but I didn't really get the feel of some different ideas and be brave enough to start making changes until Ottawa, until the third festival.
Were you making changes as you performed it, or were you just sort of
little
thinking
changes?
about
I actually
things?
changed the ending after the first festival.
Yeah.
Just a small cut that changed the ending. I had another add-on before that I had cut. And then I kind of started changing the intro a little bit as I went along. So yeah, it wasn't until, I'm always a bit tentative to make changes. But it wasn't until the third festival that I was brave enough to, write some things down and try a few different other things to hopefully make it work.
That can be really scary. I'm going to say right now that I would improvise a little bit around my piece, but the idea of writing some new stuff and trying to work that in while performing it, that's
I did
scary.
less of that. That would be terrifying. Yeah, I know, and I've heard of people who can do that, and I give them props. But I always say that I'm not someone who's naturally talented. I have to for everything that I do that's done well. There is weeks and months and hours and hours and hours that I have to put into it. So yeah, I don't think I could do that. More like just little changes, like whether or not to be in the audience when people are coming in or not. Make them
Did you?
I never did it until Hamilton. Actually, that was one that I wanted to try in Toronto. I got the idea in Toronto, and then I tried it in a couple different ways in Hamilton, and it worked okay. Yeah.
I have to say, I don't remember you being in the audience.
I didn't start trying it until the second half of Hamilton. Yeah, and then I just came around and.
Would you talk to people as they came in, or would you
just kind of not worry so much about hiding behind this curtain and kind of just breaking that fourth wall a little earlier? So I just come out and say, "Hi, I'm Carlyn. Thanks for coming." Just little conversations like that. So I'm not back there and then Fringe people are going to the bathroom and they can see you and you're like, "Oh, hi." Yeah.
I'm going to ask you now that we're talking about that, because I'm thinking about because when I performed this show in Hamilton, it's the first time I ever performed my show, and the first performance, and I knew I was entering from the audience, from the behind the audience, and so which meant that in the venue I was in, I had to be out there at the back in full view. So I had to come up with some ways to handle that, because that first performance, I swear that if I looked at the audience, I was coming in, I was going to vomit or something. How did you feel? Because, when you were performing this in London, which is kind of your home Fringe, how did it feel the first time?
In London?
Yeah, the first time you were performing the show.
It was terrifying. Yeah. I had my tech the day of, and I was really, I think I had the tech an hour before, like the tech finished and then I had an hour and then I was doing the show. So, and I had, not really a whole lot of ideas of what I wanted the lighting to be. I had some sound ideas. So we kind of all figured it out together. I had me, my director, someone who'd gotten all the sound for me was there. Someone else's director from another show came. So it was kind of a lovely family moment that everyone kind of came together, and I had a wonderful tech, and we kind of lighting designed the show all in those 3 hours before. So stressful.
Yeah. And then so that, how many hours between that tech and your first performance?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're making me want to feel ill on your behalf.
It was pretty horrifying. I mean, I got to warm up in the space for an hour, which was lovely because my tech was great. But it was pretty scary because I had never done it for anyone else. I mean, I tried to make my family sit and be an audience member beforehand, a week before, and they refused because they thought they wouldn't like it, and I'd see it on their faces. I'd never done it in front of anyone other than my director, so it was it was very nerve-wracking.
That is nerve-wracking. I actually, I was advised by some friends who had performed solo shows before to try to do do it in front of people beforehand. So I roped in a few people to sit in a room, which was again terrifying because I could see their faces, and I wasn't sure. One person, it looked like they hated the show, and I wasn't sure if that was just their neutral face, and I just sort of I didn't know what was happening, and so I ended up not being able to look at anybody. I could sort of only look around them. Because I was in a rehearsal hall, there was no lighting or anything, so it was just like a very close proximity. It didn't really feel like a performance. So that when I got into the theater and with the lights and the sound and everything, I still felt like it was the first time I was doing it. What are the plans for this show now?
So I have a dramaturg that's going to work on it with me. I got it filmed on one of the days in Hamilton, so I'm actually going to see it for the first time, which is more horrifying than anything else.
That is a nerve-wracking thing.
I debated not watching it, but then I need to obviously see it and take notes and kind of see what's working and what isn't. So I've got that planned this week. I'd like to kind of take it all the way out east or all the way out west now, because I still have a lot of fun with it, and I'd like to kind of just it's probably like 60 or 70% there. It needs to be a little bit more well-rounded, and it'll be ready to go.
Cool. I think you will find some of the fringes further west, well, especially if you get to Winnipeg or Edmonton, they're very different in some really amazing ways than the ones out in the east here. So much bigger and so much more than if we only know, like if you only knew London, going to Montreal, that's a bit of a shock. But then if we only know these smaller ones here and going to the massive ones in Winnipeg and Edmonton, that's an entirely different
it's going to be a whole nother learning curve. It's going to be like starting from scratch. I'm kind of glad that I didn't choose to go that direction the first time around, just because it was already such a huge learning curve for your own. So I'm a little bit more prepared for next year, but at least I know that it will be a whole another range of things.
The interesting thing about going to it doesn't really matter how many fringes you've done. The first time you go to any fringe, there's a learning curve, like figuring out, what do the people here accept as a pitch? Do they line up? Do they not line up? How do you pitch to people?
I noticed a big thing too is because London, Montreal, and Ottawa all overlap. Like getting to festivals late and missing kind of that preview night can be real hard.
For the cities that do a preview night, it can be a big deal to miss that. Like it can really, really hurt you. Yeah, it can be really huge to hit that. Now, not every fringe does a preview night. But the ones that do, really, it becomes a big deal and a big part of how the early audience decides what they're going to see, which is really kind of fascinating. And that goes into a whole
other thing of, of learning how to pitch your show, because that's very different than just kind of showing a piece of it too.
Yeah, and pitching the show, that's a whole thing. Like learning trying to figure out what it is that you're going to say to people. And for me, I don't know about you. For me, that's the most terrifying part of Fringe is walking up to people and talking about my show.
Go ahead.
No, I just wondering, how for me as an introvert, I have to psych myself up to walk to a line and talk to people.
For sure. I don't think I even started really flyering until the end of Ottawa, until the end of the Ottawa festival. It just because I would do maybe 3 people, a day, if that, in London and Montreal, because I was so nervous. And there's a good moment where I was talking to a touring artist that's been doing this for years in Ottawa, and we were standing in line, and there was a break where people weren't coming in, and I just turned to him and I said, "You kind of have to sell a bit of your soul to do this, eh?" And he's like, "A piece of me died a long time ago."
It's so true.
You just drop some dignity to do it, because
I've seen people who seem to thrive on it, and I don't know. I was talking to TJ Daw like a while ago, and he hated it. And this is a guy who people refer to him as a fringe god or a fringe legend, and he did not enjoy any of the promotional stuff, like walking up to people and talking to them. So if this fringe god cannot enjoy it, I don't know how the rest of us do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things where I totally get a piece of me dies every time.
You just never know how they're going to react. I mean, if people react positively, then I mean it's not so bad, because you're able to kind of talk to them about your show, and they ask questions and you're able to share it. But I mean, there are some people who will walk away without saying anything, and you're
Oh, I know. And this happened to me in Hamilton. It hadn't really happened since I was at the Calgary Fringe, walking up to somebody and saying, "Hey, can I tell you about my show?" No.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I don't know what I'm going to do now.
And then you're just standing there. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, oh, okay, so I guess I now have to move on from this awkward conversation, And
there's always other people listening too, so it's not even just you can find someone on their own. Like, everyone around you in a crowd hears.
No, and I guess you either go, okay, so I'm going to skip over these 5 people here, or just turn to the person next to them and say, how about you?
Yeah, you definitely have to keep a sense of humor, or else it's too.
It can be soul crushing otherwise. So you want to take it to other fringes, and if you were to, or do you have more solo shows in you? Have you caught the bug for that?
Yeah, I definitely have. I've been thinking about writing a show more based around just my ADHD for a long time. And I've been talking to another actor who also has it. And we've talked about maybe doing a two-hander storytelling show, which is something that I don't think I've ever seen. I'm sure it's happened, but I don't think I've seen it at Fringe before. Kind of sharing both of our stories and sharing our stories of our conversations that we've had with it, and going from there. So we're talking about getting into a room and trying some stuff out. Yeah.
That's really cool. So you were mentioning earlier that you're
yes. Well, my
on
company
Twitter.
is Squirrel Suit Theatre.
Oh, so you're on the company name?
I'm debating getting one myself now too, because it's just so helpful. I can't believe how helpful Twitter is.
It is so helpful. I actually, in a lot of ways, I don't know what we did on Fringe Tours without it.
I don't know how you guys survived. Yeah.
Without being able to both converse with people, talk to people, and even get feedback from people on Twitter. I really don't know how we did it.
Critics are on Twitter too. I definitely got some critics from Hamilton just because I tweeted at them. So I mean, just it's crazy how big of an effect it can really have.
Yeah, absolutely. What about a website?
We
do.
It's
have a website?
Squirrel Suit Productions .emyspot.com. Yeah, so that's got kind of our company started a few years ago, so we're very big on collaborating with other companies and supporting other companies. So we're all about trying to go see as much theater as we can. We have different volunteer initiatives that we're doing throughout the year as well. So lots of stuff.
So when you say we, who are the we of
it's
Squirrel
me
Suit?
and my who is my director for SAOR Free, Mel White, who resides in London. She's a paramedic, and yeah, we started the company a few years ago. It was born in Toronto when we were both living in Toronto, and then it's kind of moved around as we've moved. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's good that you're able to keep like you guys don't live in the same place, but you're able to keep working together.
Yeah, I mean,
cool.
I bounce around a lot more. I mean, not too much going on in Niagara, so it's never been too much of an issue, luckily. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're about at the end of the time that I have, so I want to thank you for coming on. And
yeah, thank you so much, Phil. It's good chatting with you again.